My name is Nathan, 32 years old, and I never thought I would have to cut my parents off after saving their home with $7,000. The shock of being uninvited from a family wedding, just to please my sister Cassandra, still burns deep. The betrayal came right after I had drained my emergency fund to save their house from foreclosure. That day I made the hardest decision of my life, choosing my self-respect over family ties. Before I dive into this painful journey, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if family drama resonates with you. I grew up in a modest 2-story home in Hillsboro, a small town just outside Portland, Oregon. Our neighborhood was middle class, the kind where everyone mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and kids rode bikes until streetlights came on. My father, Robert, worked as a contractor building other people's dream homes while maintaining our own with calloused hands and weekend projects. My mother, Martha, worked part-time as a school secretary, which meant she was home when we returned from school but always busy with bake sales and PTA meetings. My sister Cassandra is 3 years younger than me, a gap that felt like a canyon growing up. From my earliest memories, I noticed the subtle differences in how we were treated, but I dismissed them as normal family dynamics. When Cassandra broke Mom's favorite vase at age 7, there were comforting hugs and assurances that accidents happen. When I accidentally scratched Dad's truck with my bike at age 10, I lost my allowance for 3 months to learn responsibility. These differences seemed minor at the time, but they formed a pattern I would only fully recognize years later. My relationship with my parents was always complex. I was the responsible, reliable son, the rule follower, the achiever, the one who never caused trouble. This role wasn't chosen. It was assigned through expectations and reinforced through consequences. My report cards needed to be perfect, while Cassandra's C grades were celebrated as trying her best. When I played baseball, Dad questioned every strikeout. When Cassandra tried soccer for half a season before quitting, she received new cleats and praise for exploring her interests. One incident stands out vividly from when I was 13. I had studied for weeks for the regional science competition, creating a project on renewable energy that won first place. My parents attended but left immediately after my presentation to make it to Cassandra's dance recital across town. They missed the awards ceremony where I received my trophy. "You understand, right?" Mom said. "Your sister needs our support more." I nodded, clutching my unwatched victory while learning a lesson about my place in the family hierarchy. Another telling moment came during my 16th birthday. My parents had promised to help me buy my first car if I saved half the money. I worked weekends at the local grocery store for 8 months, carefully saving $2,000. 2 weeks before my birthday, Cassandra decided she wanted to attend a prestigious summer camp for aspiring artists. The cost. You guessed it, exactly the amount my parents had set aside for my car. "We'll help you with the car next year," Dad explained. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your sister." I continued taking the bus to school for another year, while Cassandra returned from camp with stories of how boring it had been. During my senior year, when college applications were due, my guidance counselor asked why I was only applying to state schools within driving distance, despite my excellent grades and test scores. The truth was uncomfortable. I couldn't imagine asking my parents for tuition money when they were already talking about how they would support Cassandra's more expensive creative pursuits. Instead, I applied for every scholarship available and planned to work through school. Despite these experiences, I pushed myself through college, earning a computer science degree while working 20 hours weekly at the campus IT department. The late nights debugging code and early morning stocking cafeteria supplies paid off when I landed a junior developer position at a software company in Seattle. Over 8 years, I progressed to senior developer, earning a comfortable 6-figure salary that finally gave me financial independence. My career trajectory stood in stark contrast to Cassandra's meandering path. She started at an expensive private arts college but dropped out after 3 semesters, claiming the professors didn't understand her vision. She tried community college next, but left when a retail job at a boutique clothing store seemed more appealing. That lasted 6 months before the early mornings interfered with her creative process. This pattern repeated through her 20s short-lived jobs, interspersed with periods of finding herself that were financially supported by our parents. While I lived within my means, carefully building savings and making modest investments in my 401 Kelvin, Cassandra accumulated credit card debt buying designer clothes and taking spontaneous trips to music festivals. When collection agencies called, our parents inevitably stepped in. "She's still figuring things out," Mom would explain while transferring money to cover Cassandra's minimum payments. Meanwhile, I received subtle suggestions that I should help more with family expenses since I was doing so well. Despite the uneven treatment, I maintained close ties with my family. Every other month, I made the 3-hour drive from Seattle to visit for a weekend, often bringing groceries or helping Dad with home repairs he could no longer manage alone. For birthdays and Christmas, I selected thoughtful gifts, a leather-bound journal for Mom's writing hobby, specialty tools Dad had mentioned wanting. I set up their home Wi-Fi, fixed their computers, and patiently taught them how to use their smartphones. These efforts came with an emotional toll I rarely acknowledged. Each visit left me emotionally drained, caught between the comfort of familiar family connections and the lingering sense that I was valued primarily for what I could provide. I maintained these one-sided relationships out of a deep-seated hope that eventually my contributions would be recognized equally to my sister's mere presence. It was a hope that would ultimately be tested in ways I never imagined. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, while I was deep into coding a critical update for our company's main application. Seeing my father's name on the caller ID was unusual enough to make me step away from my desk. Dad rarely called during work hours, adhering to his belief that a man's workday should be respected. "Nathan," he said, his voice lacking its usual confident tone, "we're in a bit of financial trouble." The understatement in his voice was alarming. My father, a proud man who had worked with his hands for 40 years, sounded defeated. After some hesitant questioning on my part, the truth emerged in reluctant fragments. My parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The bank had sent a formal notice of foreclosure proceedings that would begin in 3 weeks if they didn't catch up immediately. They needed $7,000 to bring the loan current and stop the process. "I wouldn't ask if there was any other way," Dad said, his voice cracking slightly. "Your mother doesn't know I'm calling you. She's too embarrassed." What my father couldn't bring himself to explain was how they had reached this crisis point. The mortgage payment hadn't increased, and both still had the same jobs they'd held for years. Something didn't add up, and the vague explanations about unexpected expenses in a tight few months only deepened my concern. The next day, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and made the drive to my parents' house. I arrived unannounced around noon, finding my mother sorting through a stack of mail at the kitchen table, her reading glasses perched on her nose and a cup of tea gone cold beside her. "Nathan." The surprise in her voice carried a note of panic. "Your father didn't say you were coming." "I was worried after his call," I said, hugging her before sitting down across from her. "I thought maybe I could help look at the financial situation, see if there are options besides me just writing a check." My mother's resistance was immediate but gentle. "Oh, honey, you don't need to worry about boring financial stuff. We'll figure it out." But I persisted, and eventually she reluctantly showed me to my father's home office where the family financial records were kept. What I found was alarming: a drawer full of unopened bills collection notices for credit cards I didn't know they had, and a haphazard system of paying whatever seemed most urgent each month. The mortgage had been neglected because other creditors had been more aggressive. When I opened their checkbook register, a pattern emerged that made my stomach tighten. Every month, sometimes twice, there were withdrawals labeled simply "for C." The amounts varied: 500 here, 800 there, but they totaled well over $10,000 in the past year alone. When my father returned home from work, I confronted them both in the living room, the evidence spread across the coffee table between us. "You've been sending money to Cassandra all this time." I kept my voice level despite the hurt and confusion. "Even when you couldn't make your mortgage payment." My mother looked away. My father cleared his throat. "She's had some rough patches. Lost her job again last summer. Had that fender bender that raised her insurance. Then her roommate moved out unexpectedly." The list of Cassandra's emergencies continued, each one funded by parents who could not afford such generosity. I listened, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest as I realized how deep the pattern of enabling had become. "And now you might lose your house," I said finally. "The house where we grew up. All because you couldn't say no to her." "You don't understand what it's like for her," my mother said defensively. "She's more sensitive than you. She needs more support." The familiar refrain stung, but I pushed past it. This wasn't about childhood grievances. This was about my parents' financial survival. She's 30 years old, Mom. When does the support stop? The conversation that followed was uncomfortable for all of us. I laid out the hard reality they could not continue to be Cassandra's safety net while neglecting their own financial security. My father nodded gravely while my mother dabbed at tears, both caught between acknowledging the truth and defending their youngest child. The decision to help them wasn't easy. I had been saving for a down payment on my own home, and $7,000 would significantly set back that goal. But the alternative, letting my childhood home go into foreclosure, forcing my aging parents to find a rental with their damaged credit, was unthinkable. That evening, I sat at their kitchen table with my laptop transferring funds from my emergency savings account to their checking account. The transaction completed with an anticlimactic digital chime that belied the significance of the moment. "This is a loan," I said, firmly printing out a simple agreement I had drafted. "I need you both to sign this. It says you'll pay me back $100 a month until it's paid off." My father looked offended. "Son, you know we're good for it. We don't need paperwork between family. Humor me." I insisted, pushing the paper toward them. "And there's one more condition. You have to talk to Cassandra. Tell her you can't send her money anymore. She needs to stand on her own feet." They reluctantly agreed to both conditions. My father signed the paper with a heavy sigh, and my mother added her signature with a shaking hand. I stayed 2 more days helping them organize their bills, set up automatic payments for essential expenses, and create a realistic budget they could follow. As I drove back to Seattle that Sunday, I felt a mixture of emotions: pride at having been able to help, concern about whether any real change would occur, and a lingering uneasiness about the family dynamics that had been so clearly illuminated. My parents had called me their rock as I left, thanking me profusely and promising to be more responsible. My father had specifically assured me he would have a serious talk with Cassandra about financial independence. In the weeks that followed, I called regularly to check in. The mortgage payments were now up to date. The budget seemed to be holding. My father reported a productive conversation with Cassandra, who had supposedly understood the situation and promised to find a more stable job. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful that the family might be moving toward healthier relationships. This hope, as genuine as it was, would prove to be painfully premature. The embossed invitation arrived in my mailbox on a sunny April morning, its cream-colored envelope standing out among the bills and advertisements. Inside was a beautifully designed card announcing the wedding of my cousin Emily to her longtime boyfriend James, to be held at Willow Creek Vineyard in late June. Emily wasn't just any cousin. Growing up, she had been more like a big sister, defending me from neighborhood bullies and listening to my problems when my own family seemed oblivious. Though we now lived in different states, we kept in touch through regular video calls and social media. Her wedding would be the first major family gathering since the pandemic, a chance to reconnect with relatives I hadn't seen in years. The vineyard venue held special meaning for both of us. Our grandfather had owned a small cabin near the property, and during summer visits, Emily and I would sneak onto the vineyard grounds, hiding among the rows of grapevines, playing elaborate games of make-believe. Now she would be getting married in that same picturesque setting. I immediately marked the date on my calendar and requested time off work, even though it meant rearranging coverage for an important project launch. Some things took priority, and this was one of them. That evening, I browsed through Emily's wedding registry online, selecting a high-end stand mixer I knew she had coveted for years. It was expensive, nearly $400, but Emily deserved something special. The next day, I called my parents to discuss the invitation. "We're so excited you'll be there," Mom said warmly. "Emily specifically asked if you were coming. She wants to introduce you to some of James's friends." "I was thinking we could drive down together," Dad suggested. "Save on gas, catch up on the way." Over the following weeks, wedding plans became a regular topic in our family conversations. Mom called with updates about who would be attending, reminiscing about family weddings past. Dad asked if I would help Aunt Judith navigate the vineyard's uneven terrain with her bad hip. I happily agreed to be the designated family helper, a role I had grown comfortable with over the years. "And we should coordinate for the family photos," Mom mentioned during one call. "Emily wants pictures with all the cousins from our side. Maybe wear something blue to match the wedding colors." I even volunteered to arrive a day early to help with setting up the ceremony space. An offer that Emily accepted gratefully, via text message. The wedding was becoming more than just an event on my calendar. It was shaping up to be a meaningful reconnection with my extended family. My girlfriend Alicia was equally excited about the wedding. Though we had only been dating for 8 months, things were becoming serious, and I was looking forward to introducing her to my family in a positive, celebratory environment. "We need to find you a new suit," she declared one evening, closing my laptop while I was still working. "Something that makes those blue eyes pop in the photos." We spent a Saturday afternoon shopping, eventually selecting a navy suit that, as Alicia put it, made me look like I belonged in a magazine. The price tag was steeper than I would have chosen on my own, but seeing her proud smile as I emerged from the fitting room made it worthwhile. As the wedding date grew closer, I found myself sharing stories about cousin Emily with Alicia over dinner. I told her about the time Emily had stood up to a middle school bully who had been tormenting me, or how she had taught me to drive stick shift in her beat-up old Volkswagen when my parents were too busy with Cassandra's dance competitions. "She sounds amazing," Alicia said, squeezing my hand across the table. "I can't wait to meet her." "She'll love you," I assured her. "And her fiancé, James, is one of those genuinely nice guys. No pretenses." The wedding was beginning to represent something more than just a family obligation. It felt like an opportunity to show Alicia the better parts of my family, the connections that remained positive and supportive. Perhaps it might even be a turning point in my relationship with my parents, a chance to establish a more balanced adult relationship after the recent financial intervention. 2 weeks before the wedding, I confirmed our hotel reservation, a charming bed and breakfast just 10 minutes from the vineyard. I arranged for our colleague to cover my on-call rotation that weekend. I even scheduled a haircut for the day before we would drive down. Everything was falling perfectly into place for what promised to be a memorable weekend. Or so I thought. The call came on a Tuesday evening as I was preparing dinner in my apartment. Alicia was working late, so I had decided to surprise her with her favorite pasta dish. Chopping garlic with one hand, I answered my phone with the other, wedging it between my ear and shoulder when I saw my mother's name on the screen. "Hi, Mom," I said cheerfully. "Just making dinner. What's up?" There was an unusual pause before she responded. "Hi, honey. How are you doing?" "Everything good at work." The forced casualness in her voice immediately put me on alert. My mother typically launched straight into the purpose of her calls, not one for unnecessary small talk. "Everything's fine," I replied slowly, putting down the knife. "Is something wrong?" "Oh no, nothing's wrong exactly," she said, her voice pitched slightly higher than normal. "Just checking in." "How's Alicia?" We continued this awkward dance for several minutes, her asking questions she didn't wait to hear the answers to me, growing increasingly certain that something unpleasant was coming. Finally, after a particularly long pause, she sighed. "Well, there is one small thing I needed to talk to you about," she began, her tone shifting to what I recognized as her Breaking Bad News voice. "It's about Emily's wedding." My stomach tightened. "What about it?" "Well, you know the venue is that lovely vineyard, but it turns out they have stricter capacity limits than Emily realized when she sent out invitations." I leaned against the counter, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. "Okay. And, well, Cassandra called yesterday. She's decided she wants to come after all. She has a new boyfriend she's pretty serious about. His name is Derek, and she thinks it would be a good opportunity to introduce him to the family." The pieces were coming together, but I waited, giving her the chance to finish what she was building toward. "The thing is, with the capacity restrictions, Emily had to make some adjustments to the guest list. And since Cassandra really needs this chance to introduce Derek to everyone," her voice trailed off. "Are you saying I'm being uninvited?" I asked directly, disbelief, making my voice sharper than intended. "Not uninvited, honey. Just, Emily had to prioritize, and since Cassandra has had such a rough time lately, and this relationship might be really good for her stability." The implications were unmistakable. I was being bumped for my sister. Again. "Let me get this straight," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. 2 weeks before the wedding, after I've taken time off work, bought a new suit, booked a hotel, and purchased an expensive gift, I'm being told I can't come because Cassandra suddenly decided she wants to bring her new boyfriend. "Nathan, please try to understand. Your sister needs family support right now. You're always so independent and strong. Emily knows you'll understand. Did Emily make this decision, or did you and Dad suggest it to her? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Another telling pause. We might have mentioned to Emily that it would mean a lot to Cassandra, she admitted, but Emily agreed it made sense. I heard rustling on the other end of the line. Then my father's voice replaced my mother's. Son, I know this is disappointing, but sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family harmony. Cassandra's been through a lot, and this new fellow might be a good influence on her. Dad, I just gave you $7,000 to save your house 3 months ago. I said the words leaving my mouth before I could consider their impact. That's different, he responded, his tone hardening. That was a loan between us, not something to hold over our heads whenever you don't get your way. The conversation deteriorated from there. My parents doubled down on their expectation that I would step aside, graciously emphasizing how Cassandra needed this opportunity and how I should be the bigger person. Neither acknowledged the fundamental unfairness of the situation or seemed to recognize the pattern it represented. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, the half-prepared meal forgotten. Less than 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Cassandra. Hey, big brother, she said, her voice casual, as if we were chatting about the weather. Mom said she talked to you about the wedding. She did, I replied flatly. Look, I know it's last minute, but Derek really wants to meet the family, and this seemed like the perfect chance. You wouldn't have enjoyed it that much anyway. You know how boring these family things can be. I was looking forward to it, actually. I haven't seen Emily in years. Well, you can see her another time, Cassandra said dismissively. Derek's really excited about this. He works in finance, and Uncle Robert will be there. You know, the one who manages that investment firm. Great networking opportunity. The casual way she referred to my exclusion as a minor inconvenience made something shift inside me. So you specifically asked Mom and Dad to uninvite me so your boyfriend could network. Don't be so dramatic, she laughed. I just mentioned to Mom that we wanted to go, and she said she'd take care of it. It's not like you can't see Emily another time. We talked for a few more minutes, but Cassandra seemed oblivious to the gravity of what had happened. To her, this was simply another instance of the family adjusting to accommodate her needs, a normal occurrence not worth examining. After we hung up, I sat in my darkening kitchen, reviewing not just this incident, but the pattern of my entire life. My parents had never mentioned repaying the loan that had saved their home. They had made promises about establishing boundaries with Cassandra that they had clearly broken at the first opportunity. And now they expected me to once again step aside without complaint, sacrificing my own plans and relationships for my sister's convenience. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity what I had spent years trying not to acknowledge in my family's eyes. I would always be second to Cassandra. My contributions were expected but not valued. My sacrifices were assumed but not appreciated. My feelings were secondary to my sister's whims. The realization left me feeling hollowed out, as if something fundamental I had built my identity around, being the reliable, supportive son and brother, had been revealed as a role that brought no real connection or reciprocity. I was valued not for who I was, but for what I would give up. And in that moment of clarity, something else became equally clear. I could not continue this pattern any longer. That night was one of the longest of my life. Sleep evaded me as I replayed the conversation with my parents and sister, in my mind examining it from every angle, searching for some interpretation that didn't point to the painful conclusion I had reached. Alicia found me at 3 a.m, sitting on our balcony with a cold cup of coffee, staring at nothing. "Babe, what's wrong?" she asked, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "Did something happen?" I told her everything, not just about being uninvited from the wedding, but about the pattern of favoritism that had defined my family relationships for decades. As I spoke, her expression shifted from concern to disbelief, to anger on my behalf. "That's not normal, Nathan," she said firmly. "That's not how families are supposed to treat each other." Her clarity helped solidify what I had been feeling. This wasn't just disappointment about missing a wedding. This was the culmination of years of unequal treatment and taken for granted sacrifices. The next day, I went through the motions at work, unable to focus on the code in front of me. My head throbbed with tension, and I realized I hadn't eaten since the aborted dinner preparation the night before. During lunch, I called my best friend Marcus, who had known my family since we were in elementary school together. They did what Marcus exclaimed after I explained the situation. After you bailed them out, man, that's cold. Even for your parents. Am I overreacting? I asked, part of me still seeking reassurance that my feelings were justified. Hell no, Marcus replied without hesitation. Honestly, I'm surprised it took something this blatant for you to finally see what the rest of us have seen for years. Your family has been taking advantage of you forever, and you keep letting them, because that's who you are, the responsible one, the giver. His validation was both comforting and uncomfortable, confirming suspicions I had long tried to suppress. Later that week, I had lunch with Richard, a senior developer at my company who had become something of a mentor to me. In his 60s, with grown children of his own, Richard had always offered balanced perspective on professional and personal matters. Family dynamics are complicated, he said after listening to my story. But there's a difference between complex relationships and exploitative ones. What you're describing sounds like the latter. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Cutting them off seems extreme, but I don't see how things will ever change. Richard considered this thoughtfully. I had to distance myself from my brother for similar reasons. Not identical, but similar patterns of taking without giving back. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, but also one of the most necessary for my own well-being. That evening, I spent hours researching family dynamics and emotional boundaries. The articles and forums I found described patterns that matched my experiences with uncomfortable accuracy: golden child syndrome, enabling behaviors, emotional neglect, disguised as toughening up the more capable child. One therapist's blog post particularly resonated. Sometimes loving someone means setting firm boundaries about how they can treat you. This isn't punishment. It's self-protection and an opportunity for the relationship to evolve. The next day, I scheduled an emergency session with a therapist I had seen occasionally for work-related stress. Dr. Winters listened without judgment as I poured out decades of accumulated hurt and frustration. What you're describing is a family system that has assigned you a specific role, the responsible caretaker who sacrifices without complaint, she observed. Systems resist change, which is why your attempts to establish different patterns have been met with resistance and guilt. So what do? I asked, the same question I had been turning over in my mind for days. That depends on what you want, she replied. If you want the dynamic to change, you'll need to change your participation in it. That often means establishing consequences when your boundaries are violated. The clarity came the next morning during my usual run around the lake near my apartment. As my feet pounded the path and the early sunlight sparkled on the water, I realized that the pattern with my family would never change unless I changed it. My parents and Cassandra had no incentive to treat me differently. The current arrangement worked perfectly for them. Why would they alter a system that met their needs at my expense? More importantly, I recognized that continuing to participate in this dynamic wasn't just hurting me, it was enabling behaviors that ultimately harmed my parents and sister too. My financial bailouts had prevented them from facing the natural consequences of their choices. My silent acceptance of unfair treatment had reinforced the idea that such behavior was acceptable. Back at my apartment, I sat down at my computer and began drafting an email. I chose my words carefully, focusing on specific actions and their impact, rather than assigning blame or making character judgments. After 7 revisions, I had a message that felt both honest and measured. Dear Mom and Dad, I need to address what happened with Emily's wedding and the larger pattern it represents. Being uninvited at the last minute to accommodate Cassandra after I had made significant arrangements to attend was deeply hurtful. This follows a pattern of my needs and feelings being consistently considered less important than Cassandra's. 3 months ago, I provided $7,000 to save your home when you were in financial crisis. I did this out of love and concern for your well-being. We agreed this was a loan to be repaid, and you promised to establish healthier financial boundaries with Cassandra. Neither of these commitments appears to have been honored. I've realized that our current family dynamic isn't healthy for any of us. I need time and space to reevaluate our relationship and determine what kind of connection feels respectful and reciprocal going forward. During this time, I ask that you, 1, respect my need for distance by not contacting me until I reach out. 2, begin repaying the loan as agreed, $100 month by sending checks to my address 3. Reflect on the pattern of prioritizing Cassandra's wants over my basic consideration. This isn't a decision I've made lightly or in anger. It comes from recognizing that I deserve relationships that honor my worth as much as I honor others. Nathan. Before sending it, I made one more important call to my cousin Emily. I owed her an explanation directly, not filtered through my parents' perspective. Nathan, I had no idea, she said, shock evident in her voice after I explained the situation. Aunt Martha just said you couldn't make it anymore because of work. I would never have agreed to this if I'd known what was happening. It's not your fault, I assured her. You shouldn't be put in the middle of this. Let me talk to my mom. She can speak to your parents. We can fix this. Please don't, I interrupted gently. This isn't just about the wedding. It's about a much longer pattern that needs to change. I'm going to take some time away from them to figure things out. I understand, she said, though I could hear the sadness in her voice. But you'll still be my favorite cousin, even if you're not at the wedding. And you'll always be mine, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. I'm sending your gift directly to your house. The card explains everything. After hanging up, I took a deep breath and sent the email to my parents. Then I took several practical steps to implement the boundaries I had established. I temporarily blocked their numbers on my phone, created an email filter that would move their messages to a separate folder I could check when I felt ready, and messaged a few mutual family friends to briefly explain that I was taking space from my immediate family for personal reasons. The next weeks were surprisingly difficult considering I had initiated the separation. The first Sunday without the usual call from my mother left me restless and sad. When Father's Day approached, I found myself standing in a card aisle for 20 minutes before walking out empty-handed. The habits of family connection, even when those connections were painful, were deeply ingrained. But alongside the grief came an unexpected sense of lightness. I no longer braced myself for calls that might contain emotional manipulation or requests for support. I didn't feel the familiar anxiety of wondering when the next crisis would require my intervention. Most importantly, I began to recognize how much energy I had been expending, maintaining relationships that consistently left me feeling diminished. As summer progressed, I focused on strengthening connections that felt reciprocal and nourishing with Alicia, with friends who valued me, with colleagues who respected my contributions. I continued therapy, unpacking years of family dynamics and learning to recognize my own worth independent of what I could provide to others. The wedding date came and went. I saw photos on social media, my extended family gathered among the grapevines, my parents smiling proudly. Cassandra posing with a tall man I assumed was Derek. I felt a pang of loss, but also a sense of quiet dignity. For once, I had chosen my own well-being over the familiar pattern of sacrifice. It was a small step, but it was the beginning of a new path, one where I valued myself as much as I had always valued others. My parents' reaction to my email came swiftly and predictably. Within hours, my phone was flooded with voicemails, despite the blocking they had called from my father's work phone, my mother's friend's cell. Even the landline at their house that I hadn't known still existed. Nathan, this is ridiculous. Call us back immediately. Honey, we're worried about you. This isn't like you at all. Son, you're blowing this whole wedding thing way out of proportion. I listened to each message once, then deleted them, sticking to my commitment to maintain distance. 3 days later, an email arrived, carefully worded, to slip through the filter I had created. Nathan, we received your message and frankly we're shocked and hurt by your overreaction. Families make accommodations for each other all the time, that's what family means. Cassandra has been going through a difficult period, and as her brother we expected you to understand that. As for the money, we fully intend to pay you back, but treating it as a formal loan with payment schedules feels cold and businesslike for family. We raised you better than this. Please call us when you've had time to think more clearly about your priorities, Mom and Dad. The email confirmed what I had already suspected. They saw my boundary setting as the problem, not their behavior. There was no acknowledgement of the hurt they had caused, only disappointment that I wasn't continuing to play my assigned role. A week after my email, Cassandra was dispatched as the family emissary. She flew to Seattle unannounced and showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning. When I opened the door to find her standing there, I nearly closed it again out of instinct. "Before you shut the door in my face," she said quickly, "just hear me out. Mom and Dad are really upset. They think you've lost your mind or something." I let her in but maintained emotional distance as she launched into a rehearsed speech about family loyalty and forgiveness. When she finished, I asked simply, "Did you know I was uninvited from the wedding so you could bring Derek for networking opportunities?" She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "It wasn't just that. I wanted him to meet everyone, and it seemed like a good opportunity. And it didn't occur to you that I might have also been looking forward to the wedding, that I might have made plans and arrangements?" She shrugged. "You've always been so independent. I figured you'd understand." The conversation continued in this vein, with Cassandra unable or unwilling to see beyond her own perspective. After an hour, she left with the promise to tell our parents I was still being stubborn but would come around eventually. The visit reinforced my decision rather than weakening it. The pressure didn't stop with direct family. 2 weeks after my email, I ran into my Aunt Patricia at the grocery store, an unlikely coincidence given that she lived over 30 miles away. "Nathan!" "What a surprise," she exclaimed, with obviously feigned shock. "I was just in the area visiting a friend." After some awkward small talk, she got to the point. "Your mother is beside herself, you know. She cries on the phone with me for hours. Whatever disagreement you're having, surely it's not worth causing your parents such pain." I responded politely but firmly, "I appreciate your concern, Aunt Patricia, but this is between my parents and me. I'm taking the space I need right now." Social media became another battleground. Family members posted pointed messages about always forgiving family and blood being thicker than water that were clearly aimed at me, though I wasn't directly tagged. One cousin shared an article about ungrateful children with the comment, "Some people forget everything their parents sacrificed for them." The most unsettling incident came about a month into my separation from my parents. A package was delivered to my apartment containing framed photographs from my childhood pictures of family vacations, holiday gatherings, my high school graduation. There was no note, just the images calculated to evoke guilt and nostalgia. I stored the box in a closet, unwilling to display the photos but unable to discard them. The weekend of Emily's wedding arrived with a mix of emotions. Rather than dwelling on what I was missing, Alicia suggested we take a trip to the Cascade Mountains, a few hours' drive from Seattle. We spent 3 days hiking, enjoying local restaurants, and disconnecting from technology. It was the most peaceful I had felt in months. When we returned and I checked social media, I found my feed filled with wedding photos. Emily looked radiant. The vineyard setting was as beautiful as I had imagined, and my family appeared to be having a wonderful time without me. I felt a complex mix of happiness for my cousin and sadness at my absence. Later that evening, I received a text from Emily. "Missed you so much this weekend. Just FYI, your parents spent half the reception telling everyone you couldn't come because of some huge work emergency. Then Uncle Robert had too much champagne and started asking Cassandra's boyfriend detailed questions about his finance job. Turns out he's actually a part-time bartender who's considering getting into finance someday. The whole thing was awkward. Love you." Her message made me smile despite everything. At least someone in my family understood the reality of the situation. 2 months after I established boundaries with my parents, the financial consequences of their choices began to surface again. I received a terse email from my father. "Nathan, missed mortgage payment again. Bank threatening foreclosure. Your mother upset. Let's put aside differences and discuss. Dad." I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process my feelings and consult with my therapist. Dr. Winters helped me recognize that this was a test of my newly established boundaries. "They're reverting to the pattern that's worked for them in the past," she observed. "Financial crisis leads to Nathan rescuing them. The question is, has anything fundamentally changed that would make the outcome different this time?" I knew the answer was no. Without addressing the underlying patterns, another financial bailout would only reinforce the dysfunctional dynamic. I eventually replied with a brief email suggesting they contact a non-profit credit counseling agency and including several links to reputable organizations. During these months of separation, I experienced significant personal growth. The energy I had previously devoted to managing my family's crises was redirected into my own life. I committed more deeply to therapy, working through the ingrained belief that my value was tied to what I could provide for others. I developed a closer relationship with Alicia's family, who modeled healthy boundaries and mutual respect in their interactions. At work, I channeled my focus into a major project that had been languishing, leading to recognition from senior management and an unexpected promotion. I formed new friendships through a hiking group and a local coding meetup connections based on shared interests rather than obligation. 3 months into our estrangement, Cassandra appeared at my door again. This time, her usual confident demeanor was absent. She looked tired. Her typically perfect appearance, slightly disheveled. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual breezy quality. Over coffee at my kitchen table, she revealed that our parents were facing foreclosure again. Derek had left her with significant debt from joint credit cards he had opened in her name. She had lost her latest job after too many late arrivals. "They need your help, Nathan," she said finally. "The house could be sold at auction next month if they don't catch up on payments. And you came to tell me this because I know it's my fault," she admitted, surprising me with her candor. "I've been taking advantage of them and you for years. I never had to grow up because someone was always there to clean up my messes." Her admission was unexpected, but I remained cautious. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "They need money again," she said directly. "About $10,000 this time, with all the late fees and penalties. I can't help them. I'm drowning in debt myself. You're their only hope." I took a deep breath, centering myself before responding. "I'm not going to provide another bailout, Cassandra. It wouldn't actually help any of us in the long run." Her face hardened. "So you're just going to let them lose their home, out of spite?" "It's not spite," I explained calmly. "It's recognizing that financial help without addressing the underlying patterns just enables more of the same behavior. I'll help them find resources for financial counseling. I'll help you look into debt consolidation options. But I won't write another check that postpones the inevitable while maintaining the dysfunction." Our conversation shifted between anger, bargaining, and finally, a grudging understanding. For perhaps the first time, I spoke to my sister as an equal adult, not as the accommodating older brother who would sacrifice his own needs for hers. By the time she left, something had shifted between us. She had seen me set a boundary and hold it with compassion but firmness. The ripple effects of my decision continued to spread through the family. A month later, I learned through Emily that my parents had sold their home of 30 years. They had found a smaller condo that better fit their actual financial situation. It was a painful transition for them, downsizing decades of memories and acknowledging the reality of their circumstances. Unexpectedly, Cassandra had stepped up in ways no one anticipated. She had found stable employment as an administrative assistant at a local business and was helping our parents with the move. According to Emily, she had even started a budgeting course at the community college. Extended family members who had initially been critical of my boundaries began to see the situation differently. Aunt Patricia called to apologize for her grocery store ambush, acknowledging that she had only heard one side of the story. A cousin who worked in banking confided that he had tried to warn my parents about their financial habits years ago but had been brushed off. As for me, I continued my path of healing and growth. The guilt I had initially felt gave way to a sense of quiet confidence in my decision. I missed my family, particularly during holidays and significant moments, but I recognized that the relationship we had before wasn't serving any of us well. If we were to reconnect, it would need to be on different terms that included mutual respect and balanced giving. 6 months after sending that difficult email, I received a small envelope in the mail. Inside was a check for $600 and a brief note in my father's handwriting. "First 6 payments. More to come. We're sorry." It was a small step, but perhaps the beginning of something new. 1 year after establishing boundaries with my family, I stood in my apartment looking out at the Seattle skyline, reflecting on how much had changed. The physical distance had allowed emotional healing I hadn't known I needed. The space had given me perspective on patterns I had been too close to see clearly. My life had transformed in unexpected ways. Without the constant drain of one-sided family obligations, I had flourished professionally, earning a promotion that challenged and fulfilled me. My relationship with Alicia had deepened, We were now discussing marriage and looking at houses together. I had developed friendships based on mutual support rather than obligation, creating what felt like a chosen family around me. Therapy had helped me understand how deeply the family dynamics had affected my sense of self-worth and my approach to all relationships. I had learned to recognize when I was falling into caretaking patterns out of habit rather than choice. Most importantly, I had discovered that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for authentic connection. The envelope arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, sandwiched between a utility bill and a credit card offer. The handwriting on the front was immediately recognizable, my father's neat architectural lettering. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a check for $100. Dear Nathan, I hope this letter finds you well. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking this past year. The distance between us has been painful, but it has also forced us to confront some hard truths about our family patterns. We were wrong to uninvite you from Emily's wedding. We were wrong to continuously prioritize Cassandra's wants over your basic consideration. We were wrong to take your support for granted, while failing to acknowledge your needs. Enclosed is another payment toward what we owe you. We've been sending these monthly as you requested, though I know money alone doesn't address the deeper issues. If you're willing, I'd like to meet for coffee somewhere halfway between Seattle and our new place. No expectations, no pressure. Just a chance to talk as adults. With love and regret, Dad. The letter was different from previous communications. There was no defensiveness, no attempt to make me feel guilty, no minimizing of my concerns. For the first time, my father seemed to be acknowledging the reality of our family dynamics, rather than the idealized version he had clung to for decades. I read the letter several times, allowing myself to feel the complex emotions it evoked. Hope, caution, lingering, hurt, and the pull of family connection that remained despite everything. After discussing it with Alicia and Dr. Winters, I decided to accept the invitation. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Olympia, roughly halfway between Seattle and my parents' new condo. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered some privacy while still being in a public space. When my father walked in, I was struck by how much older he looked. His shoulders slightly stooped, his hair noticeably grayer than a year ago. Nathan, he said simply, his voice catching slightly as he reached out to shake my hand, then pulled back, uncertain of the welcome he would receive. Dad, I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. Thanks for making the drive. The first few minutes were awkward, filled with careful small talk about the weather and the cafe's coffee. Gradually, though, the conversation shifted to more substantial matters. Your mother and I have been seeing a family counselor, my father said, surprising me. Started about 6 months ago. Should have done it 20 years ago, probably. What prompted that, I asked. Losing the house was a wake-up call, he admitted. But losing our relationship with you was worse. Made us look at things we didn't want to see. Over the next 2 hours, we had the most honest conversation of our adult lives. My father acknowledged the pattern of favoritism toward Cassandra and the unfair expectations placed on me. He talked about his own upbringing in a family that valued stoicism and self-sufficiency in men, how that had shaped his difficulty expressing affection toward me even when he felt it deeply. I was harder on you because I saw myself in you, he confessed. I thought I was preparing you for the world. Instead, I was just making you feel less valued. I shared my perspective too, how the constant prioritization of Cassandra's needs had affected my sense of worth. How the pattern had continued into adulthood with the financial bailouts and wedding incident. I spoke without anger, but with honesty about the hurt these experiences had caused. I need you to understand something, I told him. I didn't cut contact to punish you. I did it because I needed to break a pattern that was hurting all of us. You and Mom enabling Cassandra. Me enabling all of you. None of us growing or changing. He nodded slowly. The counselor helped us see that. Said sometimes the healthiest thing a family member can do is refuse to participate in unhealthy patterns. We agreed to move forward cautiously, a monthly coffee meeting, just the two of us at first. If that went well, perhaps including my mother after a few months. Clear boundaries about financial expectations and open communication about family events. A commitment to address issues directly rather than falling into old patterns of assumptions and unspoken expectations. As we prepared to leave, my father hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. The counselor suggested this. It's a formal acknowledgement of the debt we owe you with a payment schedule we can actually meet. We want to make this right, not just financially, but in what it represents. I accepted the envelope, recognizing the symbolic importance of the gesture. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respecting agreements and acknowledging that my contributions mattered. My relationship with Cassandra evolved in unexpected ways too. The family crisis had forced her into independence for the first time, and the experience had changed her. 6 months after my coffee with Dad, she invited me to lunch at a restaurant near her new job. "I'm sorry," were her first words after we ordered. I never saw how unfair things were because it benefited me. I took advantage of that without even thinking about how it affected you. "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious about her newfound self-awareness. "Having to stand on my own feet," she said with a wry smile. "Turns out I'm actually capable when no one's rushing in to rescue me." Who knew? We talked about our childhood, comparing our radically different experiences of the same family. For the first time, I described how it felt to watch her receive endless second chances while I was held to impossible standards. She shared how the constant help had actually undermined her confidence, leaving her afraid to try because failure had never been allowed to teach its valuable lessons. "I resented you," she admitted. "You always seemed so put together, so capable. I never realized that was because you had to be. And I resented you for getting all the support and attention I craved," I replied. This honest exchange began a new kind of relationship between us, not the idealized close sibling bond our parents had always pushed for, but an authentic connection between two adults who shared history and were learning to relate with mutual respect. Over time, our family dynamics shifted into healthier patterns. My parents downsized to a home they could actually afford and stuck to a budget for the first time in their adult lives. They made steady payments on their debt to me, each check representing a commitment to change rather than just financial restitution. Family gatherings became less frequent but more meaningful. When we did come together, there was a new awareness of old patterns and a collective effort to create different interactions. Conversations became more authentic, less burdened by unspoken expectations and assigned roles. The journey taught me lessons that extended far beyond my family relationships. I learned that true love requires respect. Without it, what looks like love is actually use. I discovered that financial support without emotional support creates dependency rather than growth. I recognize that boundaries aren't walls to keep others out, but guidelines for how we'll allow ourselves to be treated. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself can actually improve relationships rather than destroy them. By refusing to participate in unhealthy dynamics, I had created the possibility for something better to emerge, not just for me, but for everyone involved. The healing wasn't instantaneous or complete. There were still moments of falling into old patterns, still occasional resentments that bubbled to the surface. But we were moving in a healthier direction, with greater awareness and intentionality than before. As I reflect on this journey, I realize that family relationships are among the most complex human connections we navigate. The patterns established in childhood run deep, and changing them requires courage, persistence, and often the willingness to risk temporary discomfort for long-term health. The most profound lesson I've learned is that family is not determined solely by blood. It's created through mutual respect, reciprocal care, and genuine acceptance. Sometimes the people who truly value you aren't those you were born to, but those you choose, and who choose you in return. If you're facing similar challenges with family dynamics, remember that requiring respectful treatment isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic connection. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing others. It's about creating space for healthier relationships to develop. What about you? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did it affect your relationships in the long run? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar decisions. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more real-life journeys, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve relationships that honor their worth. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most meaningful growth.